Hello peoples, Digital Mouse here. You may be thinking about purchasing the ROG Ally X. I've had my ROG Ally X for almost a month now, and I'm going to show you everything I learned about it. I purchased my ROG Ally X on pre-order from Best Buy. You've probably watched a bunch of unboxing videos already, so I'm going to go through the unboxing pretty quick. When I first opened the box, I found instructions on how to power on the ROG Ally, and then right underneath that is the ROG Ally itself. I'm going to put this to the side for a second. There's a 65 watt USB-C charging brick, and then a box of instructions. I was a bit disappointed that the ROG Ally X didn't come with a case like my Legion Go or my Steam Deck OLED. Although I eventually bought a smaller case for my Legion Go, I still use my Steam Deck OLED case as the primary protection for my Steam Deck when I'm carrying it. Fortunately, the ROG Ally X still fit inside the case I bought for my original ROG Ally. Let's keep going with the unboxing. Asus made a number of changes to the ROG Ally's hardware, most of which I liked, but there was one issue I didn't like at all. I liked the way Asus redesigned the grips on the ROG Ally X. It was now more rounded than the ROG Ally. I found this made it easier for me to grab the ROG Ally X with my two small fingers, as compared to the ROG Ally, although generally, I usually default to a more open grip than a grab. The texture was about the same amount of grippiness as the ROG Ally, in my opinion. Asus decreased the size of the back button on the ROG Ally X, although I really don't use them that much. There were some really big changes to the top of the ROG Ally X. The SD card slot was moved closer to the power button and on the other side of the fan. I'm hoping Asus fixed whatever issue the ROG Ally was having with the SD cards. I appreciated Asus added an extra USB-C port, which is now Thunderbolt. They did, however, get rid of the port for the XG Mobile eGPU. On the ROG Ally X, there was a more pronounced transition between the center of the joystick and its edge compared to the ROG Allies. The joysticks on the ROG Ally X seemed more firm, but in a good way. While I was playing Call of Duty multiplayer, I felt like I had more control over my movements, and my movements were more precise. There was nothing wrong with the ROG Ally's controllers, they were fine, but they always felt kinda loose. To me, the joysticks on the ROG Ally X felt worlds better. The buttons on the ROG Ally X looked slightly taller than the buttons on the ROG Ally. They didn't feel any more clickable, just a little bit more refined when I pressed them. The D-pad on the ROG Ally X was designed in a more cross shape than the ROG Ally. It didn't make much of a difference for me in terms of gameplay, but I definitely liked the feel of the Ally X's textured cross more than the smooth gloss of the standard Ally. The only hardware change I had a real issue with was the trigger buttons. The top triggers on my ROG Ally X were fine, but the bottom triggers felt a little bit more loose on my ROG Ally X than on my ROG Ally, and I felt a slight crunchiness during the press of my left trigger. With my ROG Ally, both triggers were smooth throughout my presses. Of course, this might be specific to my device, and it didn't take away from my enjoyment of using the ROG Ally X. The ROG Ally X was heavier than the ROG Ally, weighing in at 686 grams on my scale, as opposed to the ROG Ally stated weight of 608 grams. And the Ally X is also thicker than the ROG Ally. The increased thickness and weight was a result of Asus putting a bigger battery in the Ally X. Its battery went from a 40 watt-hour battery in the Ally to 80 watt-hours in the Ally X. I'm going to go over what this meant in terms of real-world gaming time a little later on in this video, but if you like videos on the Asus ROG Ally X, hit the subscribe button. It helps me learn what to make videos about. When I tried to place the ROG Ally X in one of my docks, I found its larger size caused it to not fit properly, and I tried it with 3 different docks, like this one from JSOX, this other one from JSOX, and this generic dock. Unlike my standard ROG Ally, which would lean backwards, the thickness of the ROG Ally X caused a forward lean when it was seated in the dock. Fortunately, I was able to find this 8-in-1 dock by Ivanki. It's wide enough to fit my ROG Ally X and has all the ports I need to connect my mouse, keyboard, and controller. Here's what it looks like from the side. Once I got everything connected, the dock allowed me to play Call of Duty on my 34-inch ultra-wide. The ROG Ally X comes with a terabyte of storage, which may seem like a lot, but for the games that I play and store, 1 terabyte was used up pretty quickly. I upgraded the storage of my ROG Ally X to 4 terabytes using a Western Digital Black NVMe SSD. I cloned my SSD using the Sabrent hard drive enclosure. One thing I love about the ROG Ally brand of products is that Asus makes it very easy to remove the SSD. First, I took out the 6 screws on the back, then I slowly pried off the back cover. When I removed the back cover, I was careful not to disconnect the ribbon cable. I disconnected the battery, then unscrewed the old SSD. I just love the fact that Asus is now using the more common 2280 SSDs in their ROG Ally. This Sabrent enclosure makes cloning my Ally X's SSD really simple. The original drive for my Ally X will go into the A slot, and then my new drive will go into the B slot. I replace the back cover, power it on, and then I just hold down the clone button for about 3 seconds. I knew it was finished when all 4 lights were on. For this install, I'm adding a thermal pad and a copper plate to my SSD. My kit also came with small rubber bands, which I added to one end to keep everything in place. Once everything was together, I reinstalled my SSD, reconnected the battery. I had a really hard time with this, then replaced the back cover. Everything seemed to be going great, but then I ran into a couple of problems. When I first powered it on, it kept rebooting. Eventually I got to the screen where it asked me for a BitLocker recovery key, so I had to go to another computer to access my Microsoft account. I went to Devices and found my ROG Ally X. I clicked on Info and Support, and under BitLocker Data Protection I clicked on Manage Recovery Keys. I logged back into my account, and there I was able to find the BitLocker recovery key for my ROG Ally X. I entered the recovery key, Windows ran a diagnostic, conducted a disk check, scanned and repaired my C drive, and eventually started up again. The second problem I ran into was that Windows partitioned my 4TB drive. Furthermore, it put a 1.22GB and a 260MB recovery partition in between my C drive and 2,772GB of unallocated space. I had this problem before on a previous install, and just like last time, I was able to use AOMI Partition Assistant in order to move the smaller partitions. Then I was able to go back into disk management and combine my C drive with the larger partition. It took a little work, but all of it was worth it to me to now have 4TB of storage on my ROG Ally X, and I added even more storage with this Samsung SD card. The ROG Ally X recognized it once I inserted it, but in order to get it to work with Steam I had to go into my Steam account. While in Steam I went to my menu and left Big Picture mode. Then I navigated to Steam at the top of the page, and in the drop-down I went to Settings. I went to Storage, then hit the arrow next to my 4TB drive. I went to Add a Drive, and my SD card popped up as an option. I just clicked Add. Then I went to View and back to Big Picture mode. After I returned to Big Picture mode, I was able to download games onto the SD card. I haven't had any issues with the SD card so far, but if I do, I'll make a community post. The ROG Ally X utilizes 2 main software platforms, Microsoft Windows and Asus's Armory Crate. I was able to quickly switch between them by using the Armory Crate button. There's a third software tool that was really helpful to me. I'll get into that later. Setting up the ROG Ally X felt like setting up any Windows PC. I went through the usual steps of selecting my preferences, agreeing to Windows terms, and waiting for updates. I really feel like Microsoft could streamline this process to get you into the gaming experience faster. Learning the controls made Windows much more enjoyable to use. I was able to navigate Windows by using the right joystick to control the pointer. The right lower trigger worked as a right mouse click, and the upper trigger worked as a left mouse click. When I needed a keyboard, I went into the quick settings. And I can scroll with either the directional pad or the left joystick. I made a couple of changes to my Windows settings. First I went into power and battery, and I changed my screen and sleep time to 1 hour for everything. Then I went down to battery saver and I switched that to never. I went to notifications and I set that to off. I went to Startup and I turned off Microsoft Edge, OneDrive, and Teams. Finally, I went to Mouse Pointer and Touch, down to Additional Mouse Settings, Pointer Options, and I deselected Enhanced Pointer Precision. After installing Windows, I installed Armory Crate by clicking the icon in the taskbar. Asus packed a ton of customization and settings options within Armory Crate. The 2 top buttons allowed me to navigate through the different sections of Armory Crate. The first section I looked at was the game library. When I pressed the hamburger button in the library, it allowed me to go from a grid view to a list view. By clicking the bottom top buttons, I was able to go from game platforms to all games. And I was able to customize the library even more by pressing the dual windows on the left side. I could change how my library was sorted, for example, by name, platform, recently added, or genre. Then by going down to Customize, I could change from a vertical view to a more horizontal view. I could change the size of the cover art. I could show the game title or not if I wanted a cleaner look, and I could show the background image or blur or darken the background. The next section is a control mode. When I went to General, I was able to personalize the theme of Armory Crate. Asus allowed me to choose whatever theme I liked, whether light, or dark, or align it with my system. If there was any issues with my joysticks, I could recalibrate them in the calibration area. But I really like the performance section. Here I can change the mode from silent to performance to turbo, and it'll show me the CPU and GPU stats for each. Within system stats, I can find all the information I need regarding my CPU, my GPU, the memory and storage, and the fan speed. If I wanted to turn on Echo Assist, I could do that under the next tab. But what I especially love is the GPU settings. Here I can change the amount of gigabytes allocated to the GPU. Since Asus increased the amount of RAM in the ROG Ally X, I can allocate all the way up to 16 gigabytes to the Ally X's GPU. With my older ROG Ally, I can only allocate up to 8 gigabytes. The left button took me to my quick settings. Here I can quickly change the brightness, volume, or even the operating mode. I added end task, refresh rate, and resolution to the bottom of my quick settings. The combination of Armory Crate plus Windows took me a bit to get used to, but it eventually grew on me. Although I prefer how Bazzite and Steam separated their gaming and desktop mode, I think Asus did as good of a job as they could integrating Armory Crate with Windows. The ROG Ally X comes with AMD's Utility software. Now there's a lot that I'm still learning about, but it allows for game profile management, performance monitoring, and includes AMD Fluid Motion Frames, or AFMF for short. AFMF can improve frame rates and smooth out motion for certain games. When I played Helldivers, enabling AFMF and increasing my operating mode boosted my FPS from the high teens and low 20s up into the 30s and 40s. I was able to turn on AFMF by adding a shortcut to my quick settings. And I was able to quickly access AMD's utility software in desktop mode by hitting my right lower trigger, which was the same as right-clicking my mouse. On the home screen, AMD showed me the latest game I played and its average FPS. When I went to the gaming tab, it showed me all the games within my library, how long I played them, and the average frames per second for each. Clicking on a particular game will show and allow me to change its settings. Going into graphics is where I found AMD Fluid Motion Frames. I can enable or disable it from here as well. In the Performance tab, I found AMD's overlay, tracking, and logging features. I could enable or disable the overlay. I can choose the location I want the overlay on my screen. I could change the size of the overlay, and change the number of columns, the transparency level, as well as its colors. Here's what the overlay looks like with my settings. Size is 140, columns set to 2, and transparency at 30. I'm using the default color settings. AMD allowed me to track various aspects of the Ally X's performance, including FPS, latency, GPU, GPU memory, CPU, and system memory. I could just select the parameters I wanted to track, then click on the Start Logging button. When I finish with a game, I just click the Stop button. AMD put all the information into an Excel spreadsheet and saved it into the folder I chose. Here is a log of the FPS from Ratchet & Clank. At the top you'll see the timestamp. Under Process was the name of the game, and the FPS will begin to appear as soon as I scroll down. I was able to get the average frames per second of a tracking session by adding a simple formula to the Excel spreadsheet. AMD software has a lot of great features to monitor and improve the ROG Ally X's performance. I'm going to show you some games and the frames per second AMD software recorded. After that, I want to talk to you about the ROG Ally X's battery life. All games were played in turbo mode at 25 watts, and the resolution was set to 1080p and 120 Hz. Okay, I wanted to stop for a second and give you this disclaimer. I'm not a computer expert, and I'm not trying to portray one. I have not verified the accuracy of AMD software, so consider these numbers as anecdotal and not scientific, and don't make a purchase based upon them. Now, let's talk about battery life. I played Call of Duty multiplayer on my ROG Ally X using Xbox Game Pass. I played at 25 watt turbo, 120 Hz, my resolution at 1080p, with AFMF on. I started playing at 8:45 a.m. with 100% battery. I played several games stopping at 9:34 a.m., at which time my battery percentage was 63%. Total time on game, 49 minutes. Immediately after that, I started playing Helldivers. My start time, 9:35 a.m. with 62% battery life. I played Helldivers 2 with the same settings as Call of Duty, except the majority of my graphics settings were set to medium. I finished my last game and stopped Helldivers at 10:06 a.m. At that point, my battery level was 34%. Total time on game, 31 minutes. Now these numbers are important because I use them as a reference to compare the battery performance of my ROG Ally X to my original ROG Ally by trying to play the same games with the same settings. However, you should know that I also upgraded my original ROG Ally to 4 TB using an adapter, as well as installed a thermal pad, copper plate, and a transparent backplate with RGB lighting. Although the RGB lighting does work on a separate battery than the ROG Ally. There's a link to my video on that in the description below. Here's what happened when I played Call of Duty on my older ROG Ally. I played for a total of 38 minutes at 25-watt turbo, 1080p, refresh rate at 120 Hz. Everything was the same except for AFMF. I didn't turn that on my ROG Ally. In 38 minutes, my battery life went from 98% to 26%. Okay, let's go over that one more time. On my ROG Ally X, I played Call of Duty for 49 minutes. I then played Helldivers 2 for 31 minutes. For a total time on both games, 80 minutes. My remaining battery life, 34%. Now on my standard ROG Ally, I played Call of Duty for 38 minutes, and that was the only game I played. My remaining battery life after that, 28%. Now there are settings you can change to both devices that can extend battery life, but that's still a huge difference. I want to talk about customer service for just a second. Because when you purchase a product from a company, whether it's a handheld PC, or a car, or a toaster, you should also take into consideration the quality of a company's customer service after you purchase from them. If you search the internet, you'll find that Asus has taken some hits regarding their warranty and return policy. And to be fair to Asus, they have pledged to fix these issues. That being said, I've never sent anything back to Asus to fix, so I can't give you first-hand experience with their customer service or warranty or returns. But it's important to research and consider the quality of a company's customer service before purchasing any product. So, should you buy the Asus ROG Ally X? I really like the upgrades Asus made to the ROG Ally. I love the battery life, the joysticks, the dual USB-C ports, the additional RAM, and the fact that it uses the more common 2280 SSDs. But if I wasn't making YouTube videos, I would wait. I originally purchased my ROG Ally for $800. Right now, Best Buy is advertising that they'll eventually sell an open box ROG Ally X for as low as $642. Also, consider Asus released the original ROG Ally in June of 2023, then announced the ROG Ally X in June of 2024. That could mean a ROG Ally 2 with even better specs may be coming next year. Depending upon your financial situation, it might be worth waiting for. If you like this video, then you'll like my other videos on handheld gaming devices coming on screen right now. I'll see you in the next one.